you're alive. You're alive. And just enough for you, thank goodness. I also want to say thank goodness I don't have your job. So, for the good of all, this is, on the surface, a really simple topic. It was challenging for me because all is a relative term. I mean, in one state, all might be just me and my cat. That's all there is right now. Sometimes it's my family. That's all. Sometimes I have a sense that all includes my city or my state or my country. Sometimes all is the world or the universe. By the way, that is why there are so many religious wars, or wars of any kind for that matter, because of people's current perception of what constitutes all. It's not that they don't want to do good, but how big is my all? Well, good. That's another relative term. It's, you know, what we consider good, or for the good of all, or for the common good, is totally dependent on who I am and what my perspective is. And it's also dependent upon the race consciousness at the time that we live. Meaning that we don't hold our own individual thoughts separate and unsullied by the thoughts of the people in the world. We're impacted by the thinking and the action of everyone everywhere. So, in Hinduism, the Mahabharata talks about this relativity of good. That which is virtue may, according to time and place, be sin. And appropriation of what belongs to others, you know, stealing, untruth, and injury and killing may, under special circumstances, become virtue. Acts that are apparently evil, when undertaken from considerations connected with the gods, the scriptures, life itself, and the means by which life is sustained, produce consequences that may be good. All right. Have you ever heard of situational ethics? Depends on what's going on and what's the right thing to do, okay? So, I tend to go back to A Course in Miracles because, for me, even though it's a very thick book, it has some pretty bottom line truth to it. And in one of the lessons in Course in Miracles, it reminds us, or me, I do not know what is in my own best interests. I don't know what's in my own best interest. Now, the good news in that, by the way, if I'm willing to admit that, it opens me up to all kinds of possibilities that I could never have conceived of in this little brain of mine. And of course, in some contexts, it can be very discouraging. So the spiritual question related to that particular lesson, for me, becomes, can I be happy knowing that I don't know? See, the ego needs to know. You notice that, right? The ego needs to know. I don't care if it's right or wrong, I just need to know. Now, once the ego knows, an ego really wants to be right about what it knows. So, how many times, numerous times, have all of us each of us, done something that we thought, oh, this is great, this is going to work out, this is perfect, only to find out later on that it wasn't so good. It happens, huh? So, yeah, my higher self, spirit in me, my Christ self, that part of me actually does know what's for my highest good. But my ego doesn't have a clue. See, the ego is all busy trying to take care of my personality wishes, desires, wants, the things that will make me feel good. Very often I talk to you about unity and duality. And I talk to you about that in the context of us being called unity. But the whole concept of unity. And the story is, by the way, that Charles Fillmore, when he founded Unity, actually founded an educational institution. He didn't want to have a church. And he went through a time trying to figure out what the heck do we call this. And probably the most used word in all of the New Thought teachings at the time was unity. And somebody said, let's just call it unity. And so now when we think of unity, we think of a church and an institution and all of that. But it is a concept, a New Thought concept. So the basis of unity is that Spirit, God, is one. It's the first unity principle. There's only one presence and one power. One. The world is all about two. See, the world is about duality. And I will promise you, no matter how many different scriptures you read, from how many different traditions, and how much life experience you've had, you will always come back to the understanding that duality, what sometimes is called faulty thinking, erroneous thinking, always leads to suffering. Now, I mentioned the Enneagram. That's where Betty Lou is this morning. We spent the last couple of days there together, and it was really cool. We are going to do Enneagram workshop in September, because the Enneagram is way more than just a personality typing system. It actually is a manual and a roadmap to show us how we individually get ourselves stuck into duality, as well as what's our personal best path out of that. So, the ego is dualistic. There's right and there's wrong. By the way, you know what's right is always right and what's wrong is always wrong. It's important to be right, and only right is right. Meaning only my right is right. Only what I think is right. Spirit's non-dualistic. Spirit says that there isn't a one-size-fits-all definition of right or good. Spirit says, I don't really know what's right. In fact, it's important from a spiritual perspective to not know what's right and wrong. Not prejudge. Not be prejudiced. Not know the answer before we've even asked the question. See, spiritually, our neutrality actually is our freedom. Now, it's not that duality doesn't show up in the world, it does. But the key is, from a spiritual perspective, not to take sides. There is something called the law of three. I'm sure there's a law of two and a law of four and all that, but this morning we're going to talk about the law of three. Okay? And the law of three actually talks about the arising of the whole concept of duality. So what you have is, picture a triangle. That's a great picture. Triangles are nice three things, okay? So at the top of the triangle, because we all know that up is better than down, okay? So at the top of the triangle, you have unity. You have oneness. And out of this oneness, we sometimes make a little mistake and we perceive two-ness. Something out there and something out there. So what happens is, from this point of oneness, we see a point here and a point there. As long as we take sides, this is better than that, we're stuck. We literally get sucked down into duality. Now, funny thing about duality, each pole, if I look at duality as north and south, you know, good and bad, each pole actually defines the other. You know what they say, you can't know happiness unless you've been unhappy. You know, you can't know light unless you know dark. Some of you I know are old enough. You remember soup and sandwiches? You know, can't have one without the other. See, in this concept, in this understanding, light will never overcome the darkness. Because in the world of duality, you only know light because it's contrasted to darkness. And if darkness disappears as a concept, so does light. Our job is to neutralize and to be willing to see both sides equally. And this gets hard because in the world, because the ego wants to be right, we say, oh no, but I can't ever condone that. I'm not asking you to condone one side or the other, the polarity. What I'm saying is somehow allow yourself to be neutral. Allow yourself to admit that you really don't have a clue what's going on either end of this. That you really don't know what it means, other than in relationship to this, that you think you know what it means, but you don't know that either. Neutrality. Now, if we can neutralize and begin to see both sides equally, what happens is we free up down here, and because light rises, of course, we come back up to a perspective more in alignment with unity or oneness. That makes sense? We cut off the anchors that we placed at either end of this duality pole here, so that we can rise back up and see it all. Ah, I have a different perspective. Now, the important thing to remember is duality is not bad. Duality is not bad. If I said duality is bad, all I'm doing is I'm creating another duality, good and bad, to negate a duality. Duality in this world is just what is. So, I look at perceived duality as an opportunity to return to oneness. Oh, I notice. I think that's great. I think that's awful. If I can neutralize that, I can come back to a position more of oneness, more inclusive. So good words to focus on are words like allowing, accepting, forgiving, being open, even in some ways being curious. Wow, how could somebody ever do that? That's amazing. What must they have experienced in their life? What must they be thinking right now to be acting that way? See, that's a whole lot better than saying judgment. No way. So neutralize. You know, if I don't know what's really good for myself, I love this. We get some kind of there's another voice here. If I don't know what's really good for me, how do I know what's good for anybody else? So now I go back to my old friend, the Course in Miracles. Course in Miracles says, whatever a brother asks of you, do it, unless it does harm to him or to you. Now, isn't that interesting? Whatever a brother asks of you, do it, unless it does harm to him or to you. Here's an interesting question. What's the difference between being helpful and being codependent? So isn't it possible that as I help you, there's some part of me that goes, wow, I'm glad I was able to be helpful. Which also means, by the way, that there's probably some little teeny part of me that wouldn't feel too bad if you didn't totally get over yourself, because then you'll need to come back and I can be helpful again. You recognize that. I mean, you know, we're hardwired. In the physical body, we're hardwired to actually get pleasure from helping. But that can become its own trap. So, because we're unitics and we practice a whole lot, we have pretty clean, clear intentions. So I have none of this codependent stuff going on, not even a hint, not even a thought. But you know what? I still have absolutely zero control over how my help is interpreted and used by the person that I'm helping. Can you get that? I can give it as purely and as cleanly, and they can take it as specially and uniquely as empowering of their particular addiction or their problem or their thought process as they want to. I have no control over that. So here's a good analogy of duality. Any of you ever seen a puppet show? I mean, a live puppet show, you know, with, like that? Okay. So picture this puppet show. You got these two puppets dancing around on the stage right here, okay? Now, from the point of view of the audience, all it looks like is you got two puppets dancing around. You actually don't know what they're going to do. You don't know when it starts out, at least. Is this a good guy? Is this a bad guy? It's the story itself that begins to shape our perception, our beliefs, our made-up meaning that we put on what's going on. And I have to laugh, by the way, because sometimes you have really clever writers who will create a villain who turns out to be a hero. You know those kind of stories. What we see up here is we see a real live version of duality. But from the perspective of the puppeteer, it's one show. Each piece, each puppet, has its own part to play. The puppeteer sees it differently than we do. If that's all true, and I don't know what to do or say, the only way that I can trust my response to be helpful is to listen to spiritual guidance. And that's tricky, and we'll do that some other time because we sit down and listen to our higher self. Well, sometimes our higher self is just a little self in an ego chair. Who's your chair? But sometimes our higher self really, comes through. So we learn to make those discernments. But really, we have to know, what am I directed to do? How can I act best? Not through my mind, but through spirit. Jesus was having a conversation with the disciples. Can you imagine Jesus just having a casual conversation? Okay. Well, he was having a conversation with the disciples, and he said to them, "Do not worry about what to say or how to say it. At the time, you will be given what to say, for it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you." So somehow, I know that if I just follow spiritual guidance, no matter what it looks like in the world, my response will be supporting good. The last piece I want to cover this morning here is looking at how well defined is this greater good? See, the question sometimes is it really the greater good? Like there's one for everyone, everywhere, in all circumstances? Or really, is it a greater good, indicating one of millions of possible responses to a circumstance, each one tailored to be perfect for that particular circumstance? And I'm just bringing this up because I don't want us to get in that, what it means to be love in the world is to act a certain way. Yeah, it works sometimes in some circumstances, but in other circumstances it looks different. So, I believe that it's only by following our fourth unity principle, aligning with Spirit and paying attention, and our fifth unity principle, which basically says, let's do something, let's take action on what it is we're hearing, that we can truly trust that everything we think, say, and do is our particular way of being love in the world. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Robert.